Princess Yuna watched her human husband from the window. Jiho was in the garden again, touching the flowers with his soft hands. She did not understand him at all. 6 months ago, her father made her marry this strange creature. It was for peace, he said. The humans needed protection. The Keltharians were strong warriors. The humans were weak but smart. They could build good machines if the Keltharians kept them safe. Yuna looked at Jiho and shook her head. He was so small and fragile. Her people had thick skin like armor. They had sharp claws that could cut through metal. They were born to fight and win battles. But Jiho? He spent his days reading books and growing plants. The other nobles laughed at him. They called him Yuna's pet human when they thought she could not hear. Even her father seemed disappointed sometimes. Jiho looked up and saw her watching. He smiled and waved. That smile always made her feel warm inside, even though she did not understand why. He was so different from Keltharian males who were loud and strong and always ready to fight. She walked down to the garden. Jiho was planting something new in the dirt. His little greenhouse was full of earth plants that somehow grew well in Keltharian soil. "What are you making today?" Yuna asked. She sat carefully on the stone bench. Her weight would break most human furniture, but Jiho had asked the builders to make everything stronger. "Roses," Jiho said quietly. "My mother loved these flowers. She taught me how to grow them when I was little." He showed her the tiny red buds. "They are beautiful, but they have small thorns to keep them safe." Yuna laughed a little. "Those tiny points cannot hurt anything." Jiho stopped working for a moment. "Sometimes small things can cause big pain," he said. Then he smiled again and went back to his planting. The palace was always busy, but life moved slowly around them. Every morning, Jiho read books in the library. He was learning about Keltharian history. He could speak their language well now, but his voice sounded funny to Keltharian ears. The servants liked Jiho because he was always nice. He never shouted or demanded things like the nobles did. He said please and thank you for everything, even to the lowest workers. During the day, there were meetings about trade and business. Jiho sat quietly while Keltharian officials talked about sharing human technology. He rarely spoke unless someone asked him a direct question. When he did talk, his words were always careful and smart. Some of the nobles were mean to him in these meetings. They said humans were weak and useless. They said Yuna should have married a real warrior instead of this soft creature. Jiho never got angry. He just listened and wrote notes in his small book. Yuna often wondered what he really thought about these insults. His face never showed anger or sadness even when people were cruel. He would just nod politely and keep writing. Evenings were the best time. Yuna and Jiho would walk in the gardens or sit by the big fountain. They talked about small things. He told her stories about Earth, about huge oceans and tall mountains. She told him about old Keltharian wars and traditions. "Your people fight many battles," Jiho said one night as they watched the 2 moons rise. "Fighting is what we do best," Yuna said with pride. "We are warriors." "It is our nature to be strong." "What happens when there are no more fights?" Jiho asked. This question confused her. There are always fights. Always enemies. The strong live and the weak serve or die. Jiho nodded but said nothing more. Sometimes he asked strange questions that made her think about things she had never considered. The palace workers got used to having Jiho around. He never caused trouble or asked for special things. He ate simple food and wore plain clothes. The servants sometimes whispered about how different he was from what they expected. "He does not act like prey," old Keeper Han told Yuna once. "Prey animals are always nervous, always looking for danger. Your human is too calm." Yuna had not thought much about Han's words then. The old keeper was very old and sometimes said odd things. But lately she found herself thinking about it more. There were moments when she caught something different in Jiho's face. It happened when he thought no one was looking. His soft eyes would become cold and distant. His relaxed body would tense up, like a hunter sensing movement. Then the moment would pass and he would be gentle Jiho again. One night they were lying in their bed. Yuna asked him about Earth's armies. "Do humans have soldiers?" she said in the darkness. "Yes," Jiho said simply. "Are they like you?" There was a long pause. "Some of them. But you chose to make peace instead of war?" "Yes." His answers were always short when she asked about his past. She learned not to ask too many questions. Humans seemed to keep their thoughts private in ways that Keltharians did not. But that night, as Jiho slept next to her, Yuna wondered what a human soldier might look like. Would they be as gentle as her husband? Would they grow gardens and read poetry? Or would they be something completely different? Outside their window, the palace guards walked their routes. They were checking for enemies who might attack the Empire. They looked strong and dangerous in their shining armor. They looked like warriors should look. Jiho looked nothing like that. He looked like someone who needed protection, not someone who could protect others. But as Yuna watched him sleep, she noticed how still he was. His breathing was controlled and quiet. Even in sleep, there was something disciplined about him. Tomorrow would bring news that would change everything. Tomorrow would start to show her what was hidden behind her husband's gentle smile and soft brown eyes. But tonight she just wondered about the strange, peaceful creature she had married, and why something deep inside her whispered that there was more to humans than anyone knew. The garden outside was quiet and safe, tended by gentle hands that knew how to make beautiful things grow. But gardens needed protection from pests and diseases, and Yuna was beginning to wonder what her husband might do to keep his flowers safe. The loud alarm sound filled the palace halls. The noise made the crystal walls shake. Yuna had never heard this alarm before, but every Keltharian knew what it meant. Something very bad was coming. She found Jiho in their garden, watering his roses like nothing was wrong. The scary alarm did not seem to bother him at all. "Did you not hear the warning?" Yuna asked. She was surprised that he looked so calm. Jiho looked up and smiled. "I heard it, but getting scared will not help anyone." He kept watering the flowers. "Your father will call us when he needs us." Soon a messenger came to get them. They had to go to the big war room right away. Yuna had been in this room before, but never during a real emergency. The huge stone table filled the center. All the Empire's best generals sat around it. Her father, Emperor Minho, sat at the head with his best armor on. He looked very worried. General Hyun stood in front of a big screen showing maps of space. Red marks covered many star systems on the edge of Keltharian territory. As Yuna and Jiho sat down, the general started talking. "The Vexai have attacked 12 worlds in the past month," General Hyun said. "Every planet they touch becomes dead. Our scouts say they eat everything. Plants, animals, even the rocks in the ground. They leave behind empty rocks floating in space." Yuna felt scared. She had heard stories about the Vexai, but they seemed like old myths, monsters that traveled in living ships, eating whole worlds. No one had seen them for many generations. "How many ships do they have?" Admiral Kang asked. "Thousands. Maybe more. Their fleet gets bigger with every world they eat. They use what they consume to make more ships, more soldiers." General Hyun's voice was steady, but Yuna could see worry in his eyes. "At this speed, they will reach our main worlds in 6 months. Emperor Minho leaned forward. "What can we do? We have the 3rd, 7th, and 9th fleets ready to fight. That is about 800 ships with full crews. Our ground armies have millions of soldiers." General Hyun stopped talking for a moment. "But from what we have seen at the outer worlds, I am not sure it will be enough." The room became very quiet. Keltharians were not used to hearing their generals sound worried. They had never faced an enemy they could not beat with strength and courage. Then Jiho raised his hand quietly. "May I speak, Your Majesty?" Several nobles turned to stare. Admiral Kang made a small sound of disbelief. What could this soft human possibly say that would help in a war meeting? Emperor Minho nodded. "You may speak, son-in-law." Jiho stood up slowly, moving in the same gentle way as always. "I think we should contact the Human Colonial Defense Force. We have experience fighting this type of enemy." Admiral Kang could not hide his amusement. "Experience? What experience could your people have? You have no warriors, no real military. Your ships are tiny compared to ours." "We have fought swarm species before," Jiho said calmly. "The Rakshni problem in the Vega system, the bug wars near Alpha Centauri, the Tyranid fights in the Outer Rim." The Keltharian officers looked confused. These names meant nothing to them. General Hyun frowned. "I have never heard of these wars. When did they happen?" "The most recent was 8 years ago," Jiho said. "The Rakshni ate 14 human colonies before we stopped them." "Stopped them how?" Emperor Minho asked, leaning forward. Jiho was quiet for a moment. Yuna noticed that strange look in his eyes again. Something cold and far away. "We made sure they could never hurt anyone again." "You mean you beat them?" General Hyun asked. "I mean we made them extinct." The word hung in the air like a heavy thing. Keltharians understood war and victory and defeat. But making an entire enemy species disappear forever? That was something else completely. Admiral Kang laughed, breaking the scary silence. Your people killed an entire species, you? He pointed at Jiho's small body and soft appearance. Impossible. The bug wars lasted 3 years, Jiho continued, ignoring the insult. They had learned to eat human flesh specifically. Very good at it. Very deadly. When we were done, there were no bugs left anywhere in the galaxy. And the Tyranid fights? Emperor Minho asked quietly. 2 years. They were the worst. They learned to copy our technology, our fighting methods. They turned our own weapons against us. Jiho's voice stayed calm, but Yuna saw his hands tighten a little. That was harder to solve. But you solved it, General Hyun said. Yes, how? For a moment, Jiho looked directly at Yuna. In his eyes, she saw something that made her blood turn cold. It was not anger or hatred. It was something much worse. It was the cold, thinking look of a hunter deciding how to kill its prey. We learned to be more creative, Jiho said simply. Admiral Kang stood up, his armor making noise. This is crazy. Even if these stories are true, which I doubt, what could your tiny fleet do that our mighty ships cannot? We know how to fight total war, Jiho replied. Keltharians fight for conquest, for honor, for glory. You fight until your enemy gives up or runs away. Humans fight for survival. We fight until nothing is left of our enemies except dust and memories. The silence that followed was complete. Even the sound of the air system seemed loud. What exactly are you suggesting? Emperor Minho asked. Let me contact Admiral Soman of the Colonial Defense Force. Let us bring our experience to help defend your worlds. Jiho sat back down. The Vexai are dangerous, but they are not the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. What is? General Hyun asked. Jiho smiled, and for the first time since Yuna had known him, the smile did not reach his eyes. A threatened human. Emperor Minho thought about this for a long time. Around the table, his advisors waited. Yuna could see the conflict in her father's mind. Accept help from humans who might be lying about their abilities or face the Vexai with traditional Keltharian strength. Very well, the Emperor decided. Contact your people, but know this. If you are lying, if this is some human trick, the punishment will be severe. I understand, Jiho said quietly. But Your Majesty, I suggest you prepare your people for what they are about to see. Humans at war are very different from humans at peace. As the war meeting ended and the nobles left the room, Yuna stayed behind with Jiho. The man who had been gently watering flowers just hours before had somehow controlled a room full of experienced military leaders. Jiho, she said softly. Who are you really? He looked at her with those same gentle eyes she had fallen in love with. But now she wondered what else they might have seen, what other things they might have done. I am exactly who I have always been, he said. I just was not always a gardener. The human fleet answered faster than anyone expected. Within 3 days, Admiral Soman sent word that she was coming with whatever forces she could gather quickly. 50 ships, she said. It seemed very small. But as Yuna watched her husband prepare for their arrival, she noticed changes in him. Small things. The way he moved. The way he spoke. The way he looked at star maps and defense plans. The gentle diplomat was still there. But something else was waking up behind his eyes. Something that had been sleeping for 6 months. Something that made Yuna wonder if maybe the Keltharians had been wrong about who was protecting whom in their alliance. The garden outside was still peaceful, full of earth flowers growing in alien soil. But Yuna was beginning to understand that some gardeners were very good at removing things that threatened their plants. And they were usually very thorough about it. 3 weeks after the war meeting, terrible news came from the border systems. The Third Fleet had fought the Vexai at Talos Prime and been completely destroyed. Of the 300 Keltharian ships that had bravely gone into battle, only 12 had escaped to tell what happened. General Hyun stood before Emperor Minho in the war room. His usually proud posture was broken by defeat. The enemy ships changed during the fight. Every time we found a good way to attack them, they changed their defenses in minutes. By the end, our plasma cannons did nothing. How many enemy ships were destroyed? Admiral Kang asked. Maybe 20, maybe 30. General Hyun's voice was bitter with shame. They lost 20 ships and destroyed almost 300 of ours. The survivors say the Vexai ships got bigger during the battle. They ate the metal and technology from our destroyed ships. Yuna watched her father's face turn pale. The Keltharian Empire had never lost so badly. Their warriors were the best in the galaxy. Their ships were the most powerful, yet they had been crushed like insects. How long before they reached the main worlds? Emperor Minho asked quietly. 2 months, maybe less. Emperor Minho looked around the room at his defeated advisors. Then his eyes found Jiho. Her husband sat quietly in his chair, showing no surprise at the news of the disaster. It was as if he had expected this to happen. Contact your Admiral Soman, the Emperor said. Tell her we will accept any help she can give. Jiho nodded and used his communication device. The answer came within hours. Admiral Soman would arrive at Kelthera within 5 days with 50 ships from the Colonial Defense Force. When the human fleet arrived, Yuna stood with her father and the remaining military leaders on the observation deck of the space station. She expected to see small, fragile ships that matched her image of humanity. What she saw instead made her question everything she thought she knew. The human ships were smaller than Keltherian vessels, but they moved like living hunters. Their hulls were dark metal that seemed to eat light instead of reflecting it. They arranged themselves in formations that looked random, but felt somehow threatening. Even sitting still, they looked dangerous. Admiral Samin came aboard the station with a small group of human officers. Yuna had expected someone like Jiho, soft, gentle, diplomatic. Instead, she met a woman who moved like a hunting cat. Her eyes constantly looked for threats. Her smile was polite but never reached her eyes. Emperor Minho, Admiral Soman said with a respectful bow. Thank you for accepting our help. I am sorry about your third fleet. The Vexhai are dangerous enemies. You know about them? General Hyun asked. We have been tracking this particular swarm for 2 years. Admiral Soman replied. They ate the Altarian Republic before moving into your space. We tried to warn the Altarians, but they thought they could handle the threat alone. What happened to them? Yuna asked, though she feared the answer. They do not exist anymore. 3 billion Altarians gone in 6 months. Admiral Soman's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were talking about the weather. The Vexhai used their bodies to double their fleet size. The Keltharian officers looked disturbed by her casual tone when talking about such massive death. But Yuna noticed that Jiho showed no emotion at all. If anything, he looked like he approved of Admiral Soman's clinical approach. What do you think we should do? Emperor Minho asked. Admiral Soman turned on a holographic display showing the current positions of both fleets. The Vexhai will reach your core worlds in about 7 weeks. We cannot stop them with normal fighting methods. Then what do you suggest? Admiral Kang demanded. Total war, Admiral Soman said simply. Complete elimination of the Vexhai species. How many ships will you need? General Hyun asked. We brought 50. That should be enough. The Keltharian officers stared at her in disbelief. 50 human ships against a swarm that had destroyed 300 Keltharian vessels? Admiral Kang laughed harshly. 50 ships? We lost 300 of the finest warships in the galaxy. And you think 50 tiny human vessels can succeed where we failed? Admiral Soman looked at him with those cold, calculating eyes. Admiral Kang, you are thinking about this the wrong way. You fought them like Keltharians, with honor, with traditional methods, expecting them to fight by rules you understand. And how do humans fight? General Hyun asked. We fight to win. Nothing else matters. Admiral Soman touched the display, highlighting different positions. The Vexhai adapt to resist whatever hurts them. So we do not give them time to adapt. We do not use the same weapon twice. We do not fight fair. Yuna watched the human officers during this briefing and realized something that made her skin crawl. These were not the gentle, peaceful humans she had imagined. These people moved like soldiers, talked like soldiers, thought like soldiers. But they were soldiers unlike any she had ever seen. Keltharian warriors fought with passion, with fury, with honor. These humans fought with cold precision. They talked about the extinction of entire species like engineers discussing a building project. They planned mass destruction with the same calm focus her husband used to tend his garden. What exactly do you mean by total war? Emperor Minho asked carefully. We mean we do not stop until every single Vexhai is dead, Admiral Soman replied. Not defeated, not driven away, dead. All of them, forever. That seems too much, General Hyun said uncomfortably. Jiho spoke for the first time since the briefing began. General, what happens if even one Vexhai ship escapes? What happens if we leave even a small group alive somewhere in the galaxy? They would rebuild, I suppose. Yes, and they would remember how we fought them. They would adapt. The next time they attacked, our methods would be useless. Jiho's voice was still soft, still gentle. But his words carried absolute certainty. The only safe Vexi is a dead Vexi. Admiral Soman nodded with approval. Colonel Jiho understands the situation correctly. Colonel? Yuna felt her world shift. Her gentle book-reading husband was a colonel in the human military. You did not mention your rank when we first met, Emperor Minho said to Jiho. You did not ask, and it was not important for my diplomatic duties. Jiho smiled that same gentle smile Yuna knew so well. I retired from active service to become a diplomat, but this situation requires different skills. What will you need from us? General Hyun asked Admiral Salmon. Stay out of our way, move any civilians away from the combat zones, and prepare for what you are about to see. Admiral Salmon's expression grew serious. Humans at war are not pleasant to watch, even for allies. As the briefing ended and the officers prepared to leave, Yuna caught her husband's arm. Jiho, what are you not telling me? He looked at her with those same brown eyes she had fallen in love with. But now she saw something else there. Something that had been hiding for 6 months behind his gentle smiles and quiet words. I told you the truth when we married, Yuna. I am a gardener. I love growing things. His voice was soft and caring. I just did not mention that sometimes to protect the garden you have to remove the weeds. All of them. That night Yuna stood on their balcony watching the human fleet prepare for battle. The dark ships moved in the void like sharks in deep water, silent and deadly. She thought about her husband working in his garden, carefully removing pests and diseases to protect his flowers. She was beginning to understand that the Vexi had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were hunting prey, but they had wandered into a garden tended by gardeners who had learned that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was make sure harmful creatures could never hurt anything again. The real question was what would happen when those gardeners decided something needed to be removed forever. And as she watched the human ships position themselves like pieces on a chessboard, Yuna had the feeling she was about to find out. The garden was peaceful below, full of earth flowers growing in alien soil. But gardens needed protection, and she was beginning to suspect that human gardeners were very, very good at their job. The combined fleet prepared for battle at Kelthera's Gate, an important space area that would decide the fate of both civilizations. Yuna found herself spending more time on the command bridge, watching the preparations with growing worry. The human ships had changed since they arrived. What had looked like 50 simple vessels now showed themselves as something far more complex. Each ship seemed to unfold like a deadly flower, showing hidden weapon systems and armor that had been concealed beneath their dark hulls. Stealth setup, Admiral Soman explained to the Keltharian officers. We always arrive looking smaller than we are. Enemies make better mistakes when they think we are weak. Yuna watched her husband during these briefings and saw more changes every day. The gentle diplomat was still there, but it was like watching an actor who was slowly taking off his costume. Jiho moved differently now, spoke with quiet authority that made veteran Keltharian officers listen carefully to his suggestions. The human soldiers treated him with obvious respect, calling him colonel and waiting for his approval before doing anything. It was clear that despite his diplomatic title, these people considered him their real leader. One evening, as the fleets got ready for the coming battle, Yuna finally confronted Jiho in their rooms. Tell me the truth about your past, she said. No more gentle answers. I need to know who I married. Jiho sat down heavily in his chair, suddenly looking older than his years. For a long moment he was quiet, staring out at the stars where tomorrow there would be war. I served in the Colonial Defense Force for 15 years, he said finally. I was there for the Kepler Rebellion when human colonies tried to break away from Earth government. I fought in the Proxima Siege when the Centauran Empire thought humans would be easy to conquer. I commanded the ground forces during the Glass Desert Campaign. What was the Glass Desert Campaign? Yuna asked, though something inside her was afraid of the answer. There was a species called the Harvek. They were raiders who took human slaves. They thought we were soft, weak prey. Jiho's voice stayed calm, but his hands tightened slightly. They were wrong. What happened to them? Their homeworld was a beautiful place. Green forests, crystal rivers, cities that floated in the clouds. Jiho met her eyes, and for the first time she saw the full depth of what lived behind his gentle expression. Now it is a glass desert. The sand still glows with radiation 300 years later. Yuna felt cold despite the warm air in their rooms. You killed an entire planet? We gave them chances to return the slaves and stop the raids. They laughed at our weak human threats. Jiho shrugged slightly. So we made sure they could never threaten anyone again. Ever. How many died? All of them. Every Harvek in the galaxy. We hunted down every ship, every colony, every outpost. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was describing his gardening routine. It took 2 years, but we were thorough. Yuna stared at her husband, trying to understand how this information fit with the man who grew roses and read poetry. And the others? The Rashni? The species you mentioned in the war meeting? The Rashni were different. They were a hive mind that ate organic matter to make more soldiers. Very efficient. Every human they killed made 10 new Rashni soldiers. Jiho stood and walked to the window. We had to get creative with that one. Creative how? We learned to think like them. Hive minds are efficient but predictable. They follow patterns. He pointed to the human ships outside. We fed them false information, made them think they were winning, drew their entire fleet to one system. Then what? We collapsed the system's star, turned it into a black hole. Jiho said this as casually as he might discuss the weather. Took the entire Rashni civilization with it. One moment they were celebrating their victory, the next moment physics deleted them from existence. Yuna felt sick. And the Tyranids? Ah, the Tyranids. They were the worst. For the first time, emotion came into Jiho's voice. Not sadness or regret, but something like professional appreciation. They were adaptive. Too adaptive. They copied our technology, our tactics, even our appearance. By the end, they looked and fought exactly like us. How did you tell them apart? We could not. So we stopped trying. Jiho turned back to her, and his eyes held that cold, predatory look she was learning to recognize. We developed weapons that would kill anything with Tyranid DNA. Did not matter if they looked human, acted human, even thought they were human. The weapons found them anyway. But what if there were mistakes? What if real humans were killed? There were mistakes. Unavoidable ones. Jiho's voice showed no emotion at all. We accepted that as the price of survival. Better to lose some of our own than lose our entire species. The silence stretched between them. Outside, the human fleet continued its preparations with mechanical precision. Every movement was calculated, every position planned for maximum killing efficiency. Were you always like this? Yuna asked quietly. No. Jiho smiled, and for a moment he was her gentle husband again. I was a teacher before I joined the military. I taught children about Earth's history and literature. I loved that job. What changed? The Harvik took my students on a raid. 43 children, ages 8 to 12. The smile faded. I joined the Colonial Defense Force the next day. Turns out I was very good at war. And after the wars ended, I tried to go back to teaching. But I kept seeing threats everywhere. Kept planning how to eliminate enemies that did not exist. Jiho sat back down, suddenly looking tired. My commander suggested I try diplomacy. They said my experience with total war would help me negotiate peace more effectively. Has it? Yes. When you have seen what humans can do when we stop playing nice, you understand why peace is so valuable. You work harder to maintain it. Yuna thought about this. And if peace fails? Then we remember what we are underneath all the civilization and diplomacy. Jiho looked directly at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her understand why entire species had chosen extinction rather than face what humans were capable of becoming. The next morning brought news that the Vex-High fleet had been detected approaching. Kelthera's gate, Admiral Soman called all commanders to a final briefing, and Yuna watched her husband transform completely. Gone was any pretense of being a retired diplomat. Colonel Jiho stood before the tactical displays with the confidence of someone who had planned the destruction of civilizations. His voice carried quiet authority as he outlined strategy with Admiral Soman. Phase 1, long-range attacks to test their adaptive abilities. Phase 2, close fighting to force them to show their full defenses. Phase 3, implementation of Terminal Protocol 7. What is Terminal Protocol 7? General Hyun asked. Admiral Soman smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Something we developed after the Tyranid Wars. The Vex-High will not be able to adapt to it because they will not understand what is happening until it is too late. And if it does not work? Admiral Kang asked. Jiho answered. Then we move to Terminal Protocol 8, then 9. We have protocols all the way up to 26. What is Terminal Protocol 26? Yuna found herself asking. Stellar engineering, Jiho replied calmly. We move stars around to create killing fields that span entire solar systems. Very effective, but it takes time to set up. The casual way he discussed moving stars like chess pieces made Yuna realize that she had never truly understood what humans were capable of. They were not just warriors or soldiers. They were something far more dangerous. They were gardeners on a galactic scale, and they had decided the HFY were weeds that needed to be removed. As the fleets moved into position for the coming battle, Yuna stood beside her husband on the command bridge. He was checking weapon systems and targeting computers with the same careful attention he gave to his roses. Jiho, she said quietly, after this is over, will you go back to being a diplomat? He looked at her with those same gentle eyes she had fallen in love with. If the garden is safe, yes. I prefer growing things to destroying them. And if the garden is not safe, then I will do whatever is necessary to protect it. His smile was warm and loving, but behind it lay the absolute certainty of someone who had personally supervised the extinction of multiple species. That is what gardeners do, Yuna. We take care of what we love. The battle was about to begin, and for the first time, Yuna was not worried about the HFY. She was worried about what would happen to anything foolish enough to threaten a garden tended by creatures who could casually discuss moving stars to kill their enemies. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had been so peaceful for so long, not because they could not fight, but because when humans went to war, entire species stopped existing, and they did it with the same calm precision they used to tend their flowers. The battle lasted 18 hours, but the war was decided in the first 30 minutes. Yuna watched from the command bridge as the HFY swarm came out of hyperspace. Thousands of living ships moved like a tide of death. They were even more scary than the reports had said. The bioships pulsed with alien life, their hulls constantly changing as they got closer to the combined fleet. They are beautiful in their own way, Admiral Soman said calmly. Evolution made perfect for eating and making more of themselves. Very good design. The Keltharian officers looked nervous as the enemy fleet approached. Even after recent defeats, seeing such overwhelming numbers was frightening. The HFY had more ships than both human and Keltharian fleets combined, but Jiho stood relaxed at his command station, studying the approaching swarm with the same focused attention he gave to his garden plans. Begin Phase 1, he ordered quietly. The human ships opened fire with weapons the Keltharians had never seen before. Instead of plasma cannons or energy beams, they fired projectiles that seemed to bend space around them. The rounds traveled faster than light itself, arriving at their targets before the muzzle flashes had even faded. Dozens of HFY ships simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, deleted. They were there one moment and gone the next, leaving only empty space where living starships had been. Time displacement weapons, Admiral Soman explained to the stunned Keltharian observers. We fire the projectiles backwards in time by a few seconds. They hit before we shoot them. That is impossible, General Hyun whispered. Impossible is just another engineering problem, Jiho replied without taking his eyes off the tactical display. The Tyranids taught us that normal thinking was a weakness to overcome. The HFY fleet began to adapt, their ships changing shape and density to resist the time weapons. But every time they found a defense, the humans switched to something completely different. Gravity bombs that turned enemy ships into tiny black holes. Quantum viruses that convinced matter it was antimatter. Dimensional rifts that folded space so enemy ships crashed into themselves. Phase 2, Jiho announced. The human fleet suddenly changed formation, moving in patterns that hurt Yuna's eyes to follow. The ships seemed to be in multiple places at once, existing in probability clouds rather than fixed positions. Uncertainty drive, Admiral Soman noted conversationally. We exist in quantum superposition during combat. Very hard to target something that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The HFY swarm, confused by enemies they could not pin down, began grouping together in defensive clusters. This was apparently what the humans had been waiting for. They are learning, Jiho said with satisfaction. Good. Concentrated targets are more efficient to process. Process? Yuna asked. Phase 3, Terminal Protocol 7. The human ships stopped firing normal weapons. Instead, they released clouds of something that looked like metallic dust. The particles spread through space toward the clustered HFY ships, seeming harmless and slow. When the dust clouds reached the bioships, nothing appeared to happen for several minutes. Then the first HFY vessel began to change. Its organic hull started dissolving, not destroyed but systematically taken apart at the smallest level. Self-copying nanomachines, Admiral Soman explained as more enemy ships began falling apart. They are programmed to break down any organic matter they find and use the raw materials to build more nanomachines. Will they not eat everything? General Hyun asked in horror. They are coded to stop copying themselves after exactly 24 hours, Jiho said calmly. Learned that lesson during the bug wars. Cannot have the cure being worse than the disease. Yuna watched in fascination and terror as the nanomachine clouds spread through the HFY fleet like a plague. Ships that had survived the earlier attacks now dissolved into their basic atoms. The mighty swarm that had eaten entire star systems was being consumed by invisible machines, smaller than dust particles. The few HFY ships that tried to escape found the human fleet waiting for them. There was no pursuit, no dramatic chase through space. The humans simply appeared wherever the bioships tried to run, cutting off every escape route with mechanical precision. How did you know where they would go? Admiral Kang asked. We have done this before, Jiho replied. Fleeing predators follow predictable patterns. They run toward what they think is safety. And where did they think was safe? The outer system. Open space where they could regroup? Jiho smiled, that gentle smile Yuna knew so well. We have been seeding those areas with nanomachine clouds for the past week. The entire system is trapped. By the end of the first day, the battle was over. The HFY fleet was gone. Not defeated, not scattered, but completely eliminated. Every bioship had been reduced to basic elements floating in space. The nanomachines had done their work with mechanical efficiency, then self-destructed as programmed. But the humans were not finished. Over the next 3 months, Yuna watched as Admiral Somin and Colonel Jiho coordinated what they called cleanup operations. Human ships spread throughout the galaxy, hunting down every remaining trace of HFY presence. They found hidden breeding worlds, sleeping spore clusters, even individual bioships that had been traveling between stars for decades. None were allowed to survive. The humans tracked down every piece of HFY genetic material in the galaxy and systematically destroyed it. They burned out asteroid colonies where HFY eggs might have been hidden. They sterilized entire systems where biospores might have drifted. They even found and eliminated the original HFY homeworld, a dead planet that had been consumed by its own children long ago. When it was over, Admiral Soman made her final report to Emperor Minho. The HFY species is extinct, she announced. We have verified the elimination of all genetic material, all technology, and all traces of their civilization. They pose no further threat to anyone. How can you be certain? General Hyun asked. We have done this before, Admiral Somin repeated Jiho's earlier words. Thorough extinction requires thorough methods. We have had 300 years to perfect the process. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Yuna found herself walking through the palace gardens with Jiho. He was back to tending his roses, his movements gentle and careful. The nanomachine clouds that had dissolved an entire species had been controlled by these same hands that now carefully pruned flower stems. Was it necessary to hunt down every last trace? She asked. Yes, Jiho replied simply. Life finds a way to survive unless you are completely thorough. One missed spore, one overlooked egg, and eventually they would have returned. Better to end the threat forever. You do not feel any regret? Jiho considered this as he worked. I feel regret for the necessity. I wish they had chosen differently. I wish they could have existed without threatening others. He looked up at her, but they made their choice when they decided to consume entire civilizations. We simply helped them face the consequences. And now the garden is safe. Your people are safe. My people are safe. The galaxy is free of something that would have eventually consumed everything. Jiho returned to his roses. This is what I prefer. Growing things instead of destroying them. Yuna watched her husband work and finally understood what she had married. Not a weak creature needing protection, not a gentle soul afraid of conflict. She had married a gardener who tended life on a galactic scale, someone who could nurture beauty and eliminate threats with equal skill and precision. Will you go back to being a diplomat now? She asked. For as long as the galaxy stays peaceful, Jiho confirmed. I like this life much better than the alternative. And if something else threatens the garden? Jiho paused in his work and looked at her with those same brown eyes she had fallen in love with. Behind the gentle warmth lay something that had personally supervised the extinction of multiple species, something that could move stars and manipulate time itself if necessary to protect what it loved. "Then I will do what gardeners do," he said quietly. "I will remove the weeds." That evening, as Kelthera's twin moons rose over the palace, Yuna stood on their balcony watching the last human ships depart. They moved like shadows against the stars, invisible unless you knew where to look, carrying their terrible capabilities back to human space where they would sleep again until needed. In the garden below, Jiho worked by moonlight, carefully planting new flowers in soil enriched by ash from the nanomachine processing of Vexi bioships. Life growing from death, beauty emerging from destruction, peace maintained by the absolute certainty that anything threatening it would simply cease to exist. She finally understood what made humans so dangerous. They were not warriors driven by passion or conquerors seeking glory. They were gardeners who had learned that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was make sure harmful creatures could never hurt anything again. The galaxy was safe because somewhere in human space, gentle diplomats tended their flowers and read their poetry, secure in the knowledge that if threatened, they could reach into tool sheds filled with technologies that could delete species from existence as easily as pulling weeds. And they would sleep peacefully, dreaming of gardens and growth until something foolish enough to threaten their peace woke the terrible thing that lived behind their gentle eyes.